What is in the video? The January 6th committee now has its hands on never-before-seen raw documentary footage of Donald Trump and his family members in the days leading up to and after the insurrection. So far, we do know the footage includes an interview with Trump's daughter Ivanka a few weeks after the election. Unlike the recorded deposition Ivanka gave to the committee, she told the documentary filmmaker her father should pursue every avenue to challenge the results of the 2020 election, according to a source familiar with the footage. CNN chief congressional correspondent Manu Raju joins us now live from Capitol Hill. Manu, when are we going to get to see what's on these tapes?
Well, the committee is now just going through this footage, which has been subpoenaed by the committee, including this British filmmaker Alex Holder will meet with the committee tomorrow as they try to look into what he is promising, which is never before seen footage, including exclusive interviews with Donald Trump before and after the January 6th insurrection, as well as interviews with key members of the Trump inner circle, including his eldest daughter, Ivanka Trump, who appeared to have said something different to this filmmaker than what she had told the January 6th committee. She told this filmmaker her father should continue to fight until every legal remedy is exhausted, and that's what he should do. Now, the committee has released a snippet of her private deposition to them earlier this year, in which she had said that she agreed, or she accepted what the former Attorney General Bill Barr said, that the claims of fraud were essentially BS. And in Barr's words, she said she accepted that. Now, we'll see what else she also said in that deposition and what else she said among this footage. Now, this all comes, Jake, as the lawmakers on this committee are planning to delay their next round of hearings, which were expected to be next week. But instead, they're going to wait till mid-July because they're now going through what they're saying is a deluge of new evidence, in the word of Jamie Raskin, a member of the committee, who told me earlier today, not just this issue, but evidence from the National Archives, tips that are coming in from their tip line, have all forced the committee to look into all this new information and reassess how they're going to present their findings.
All right, Manu Raju reporting live on Capitol Hill for us. Thanks so much. As we wait for the committee to dig through all that new evidence, we wanted to get a sense of the impact these hearings are having or are not having on real Americans. CNN's Jeff Zeleny spoke to voters who are tuning in and voters who tuned out long ago to gauge their reactions to the proceedings so far.
History repeats itself, and so I do think we need to have history record what happens to prevent this from happening again.
Frank Richards has been closely watching the congressional hearings investigating the January 6th attack, hoping all Americans, not just Democrats like himself, are paying at least some attention.
From the hearings, and I'm not a big Mike Pence fan, I really respect what Mike Pence did. I think we all need to be patriots and respect the Constitution, which we're sworn to defend.
Richards is among the millions who have tuned into the 4 televised hearings this month, which have shined an unsparing light on Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, here in Georgia and beyond. Yet despite new details of the lengths Trump and his allies tried to cling to power,
Mr. Trump was told by his own advisors that he had no basis for his stolen election claims. Yet he continued to pressure state officials to change the election results.
The hearings have elicited disinterest and disdain among many in the Republican-leaning suburbs of Atlanta.
I really think they're just after Trump. They're not after the truth.
It's one-sided, and I choose not to watch it.
Is there anything that could come out in the hearing that would change your mind about things?
All I know is I'm not going to watch the rest of it. You know, I have other things to do with my time.
Well, I'm not a crook.
A half century after the Watergate hearings captivated the country and led to Richard Nixon's resignation, the findings of the House Select Committee, so far at least, are largely seen through the same partisan lens that deeply divides an exhausted nation. Yet there is nuance, as we found talking to Richard Bianco, who voted for Trump the first time, but not his re-election.
You know, I'm a Republican, and a lot of people need to be held accountable, but we're not getting anywhere.
Is Trump one of those people that needs to be held accountable, do you think?
If we could get the information out, yes.
Franzetta Ivy said she has prayed for people to watch with an open mind.
I pray that they will actually tune in and watch this so they can see for themselves.
The hearing has shined an even brighter light on Trump's meddling in Georgia.
I just want to find 11,780 votes,
which voters in both parties told us crossed a line.
I need so many votes, and that's so ridiculous. It's almost like Trump. First of all, you really think that's like gangster?
Harvey and Patricia Newman, both Democrats, have watched every moment of the proceedings.
This is an attack on our democracy. I do not think the Watergate hearings rose to that level, even close. Do you?
No, I think you're right.
Finding the truth for history is important, they say, but even more for future elections.
They get off, then I can't tell you how worried I am about 2024.
And that was a sentiment we heard again and again, that voters are worried about the 2024 election. But Jake, take a look at these new numbers we're getting from a Quinnipiac poll about to viewers across the country. 6 in 10 Americans say they are carefully watching this, or are watching the hearing, excuse me. But you can see the breakdown there. Very closely, about 26% of Americans, somewhat closely 32%. It goes down from there. But there is a significant partisan divide about what voters are learning. Take a look at these numbers. 64% of Democrats say they are learning something new. A third of independents say they are, only 14% of Republicans. That is significant there when you look at the independents. So the bottom line of all this conversation, information is seeping out among voters of all stripes, no doubt about it, but it depends what partisan lens they are viewing these hearings through. But in Georgia, at least, one thing I was struck by, even Trump voters, they do not believe his Georgia election lies at all. Perhaps Georgia is a bit of an outlier because it was at the center of all of this. But one thing also in follow-up questions, they're not eager to have him run again for president, but they're not necessarily watching these hearings either.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Really interesting. Vox Populi. Joining us live to discuss the progress of the January 6th committee hearings is Amanda Carpenter. She's a political columnist for The Bulwark and a conservative commentator. Amanda, good to see you. So your latest column this week argues that former President Trump is reacting to these hearings in a way that proves the committee's points. For instance, here is Trump a few days ago responding to testimony about his pressure on Vice President Pence to overturn the election.
I never called Mike Pence a wimp. I never called him a wimp. Mike Pence had a chance to be great. He had a chance to be, frankly, historic. But just like Bill Barr and the rest of these weak people, Mike, and I say it sadly because I like him, but Mike did not have the courage to act.
So, Amanda, explain. How does this prove the committee's case?
Sure. I mean, the central thesis of the January 6th committee is that these investigations are needed not only to review what happened on January 6th, but that it's urgent because the threat to our elections and election officials persist. And that was surely proven by Donald Trump's speech that he gave on Friday to the Faith and Freedom Coalition. And in that speech, as you pointed out, he was still targeting Mike Pence, calling him weak, saying he didn't have the courage to act. And he was even saying this after the January 6th committee clearly demonstrated that the mob that Trump sent to Capitol Hill that got within 40 feet of Mike Pence that day, that put Mike Pence's life in danger, was motivated by that rhetoric. And so while we pay attention to what is happening in that room and the facts that are being presented, I think we also need to pay close attention to how Trump is reacting to it, because that surely shows how the threat persists. And also in that same speech, he dangled pardons, and it wasn't the first time he did it. He dangled pardons for the rioters.
Let me interrupt you for there, just to run that clip. Here is, as you know, one of the arguments that the committee's making is that the mob, the insurrectionists that attacked the Capitol, felt as though they were carrying out Trump's desires. And here is, as you were alluding to, Trump talking before that very same conference of evangelical Christians.
Most people should not be treated the way they're being treated. And if I become president someday, if I decide to do it, I will be looking at them very, very seriously for pardons. Very, very seriously. They've been treated very unfairly. Should I decide to do that?
And listen to the audience applauding.
Yeah, and I think that is just as disturbing, right? I mean, this is an audience of evangelical Christians. Ideally, that would be an audience for Mike Pence to be speaking before as a possible 2024 contender, but he couldn't even appear. He somehow had a scheduling conflict. And isn't it funny? Anytime that the subject of January 6th comes up, Mike Pence has a scheduling conflict. Is it because he's still in danger through this kind of rhetoric that Donald Trump is using? I think it's very possible. And just listen to what Donald Trump is saying. Should I decide to become president again, I'm seriously considering pardons for the rioters, people facing extremely serious charges before the Department of Justice right now. That's practically a campaign promise. And not only that, he did issue a long, 12-page statement that used extremely insightful rhetoric, calling January 6th committee members guilty of committing treasonous activity. Those are the kinds of words that lead to violence. Those are the kinds of words that motivated the mob to act that day. And so surely the threat continues. I think Donald Trump is the best witness against himself at this moment.
Amanda Carpenter, thank you so much. Good to have you on again. They're on the front lines of democracy, dealing with the very real threat of election interference from proponents of Trump's election lies. We're going to talk to an attorney general on the front lines, then a country already in crisis. In our politics lead, the clearest sign yet that Trump's big lies about the election fraud could have theoretically ended democracy, as we noted in the United States, if it had not been for election officials, Republican ones, who put country above party and displayed courage in the face of direct threats and harassment. Take a listen.
I went to that icon and it was just a lot of horrible things there.
And those horrible things, did they include threats?
Yes, a lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that, I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.
And Shay Moss, an election worker in Fulton County, Georgia, talking about the threats she and her family went through. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel and Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser join us now live, two people who have seen the threat to democracy firsthand and have no doubt heard their share of threats themselves. Attorney General Nessel, let me start with you. The left-leaning Brennan Center did a poll in early February asking 600 local election officials, nonpartisan ones, about their jobs. They found nearly 1 in 3 election workers know at least one colleague who quit their job in part or entirely because of safety concerns. Are you worried about Michigan having a shortage of election workers in 2022 or 2024?
Well, we're doing everything we can to try to avoid that. And I know that, all around the state, there's recruiting underway to make sure that we get new poll workers and that they're properly trained. But the other thing that we're doing is that my department, our hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit, is aggressively prosecuting those that threaten election workers. And we want people to know that we take that very seriously, and that if you do engage in that kind of conduct, you're going to be held accountable.
Attorney General Weiser, the Justice Department's Election Threats Task Force got its first guilty plea from a Nebraska man who made death threats against Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold online. How is Colorado working with DOJ to catch and prosecute these threats posted on social media?
Like my colleague, Attorney General Nessel said, these threats are serious. And when you target an election official, you're committing a crime. We put out an advisory recently telling people that if you do this, we'll hold you accountable. This is not okay. It's a threat to our democracy. And as Judge Luty said this week, what we saw on January 6th is not a moment in time. It continues with plans to continue to disrupt elections. We can't allow that to happen.
How do you judge the line, Attorney General Nessel, between what's rhetoric and what's an active threat?
Well, we do it the same way that we assess all other threats. It's not really unique to just election workers, right? And, there's certain language that is used. Remember, these aren't public officials, right? I mean, maybe the Secretary of State is, but local elected officials, they certainly didn't sign up for this. And we have to do everything in our power to protect them. And I will say this, my department is working very closely with, the Clerks Association. So we're meeting with them regularly now. Our chief investigator just met with the clerks at their annual conference. And we're going to be coordinating with them regularly, as well as with state police, local law enforcement, and probably the federal authorities as well, just to ensure that election workers are kept safe in our state, and so that people can volunteer or they can sign up if they're paid positions to work for our democracy, because obviously these are essential positions, and to know that they are going to be kept safe.
Attorney General Nessel, let me stay with you because former Michigan Republican Party Chairwoman Laura Cox told the committee some Republicans were considering hiding out in the Michigan State Capitol overnight to strengthen their bid to overturn the 2020 election. She said there were internal discussions within the Michigan Republican Party about submitting a fake certificate to the National Archives, falsely saying that Trump won Michigan. What do you make of that?
I think that Laura Cox is going to make a fabulous witness.
Attorney General Weiser, let's listen to former Georgia election worker Shay Moss during her testimony again.
The other election workers shown in that State Farm Arena video and their supervisors, how many are still election workers in Fulton County?
There is no permanent election worker or supervisor in that video that's still there.
And did you end up leaving your position as well?
Yes, I left.
What is Colorado doing to ensure election workers don't lose faith in their jobs and aren't fleeing because they're worried about becoming targets, and voters then don't become disenfranchised?
We're telling election workers that we have their back, that we're protecting them, and that we take this with the utmost seriousness. It is critical that we celebrate and not allow tormenting about people who are involved in this basic part of our democracy. This is crucial. And what happened in Georgia and hearing Shane Moss in that testimony is just gut-wrenching.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it, and thanks for what you do. While Ukraine just had its worst 24 hours. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We start today with our money lead and President Biden's latest attempt to tame the insanely high gas prices plaguing Americans. The president this afternoon called on Congress to temporarily suspend the federal gas tax, which is right now about 18 cents a gallon. It's a move President Biden has resisted until today, given that it is unlikely to pass Congress. Republicans widely oppose it, and even some leading Democrats are skeptical that oil companies will actually pass that savings on to drivers. The proposed suspension is part of a larger plan introduced by President Biden earlier today, which the White House claims could save drivers up to $1 per gallon of gas. As CNN's Caitlin Collins reports, this is going to be an uphill battle to get Congress, the states, and oil companies all on board. It's causing some Democrats to wonder if President Biden is setting himself up once again for a defeat on Capitol Hill.
Hoping to bring relief to frustrated drivers across the U.S., President Biden called for a 3-month gas tax holiday today.
We can bring down the price of gas and give families just a little bit of relief.
If enacted, the move would suspend the federal gas tax for the next 90 days, the peak driving period for many summer vacations.
Now, I fully understand that a gas tax holiday alone is not going to fix the problem, but it will provide families some immediate relief, just a little bit of breathing room as we continue working to bring down prices for the long haul.
The federal tax only a small slice of what consumers are paying at the pump. 18 cents per gallon of regular gasoline and 24 cents per gallon of diesel. Getting the gas tax holiday passed could be an uphill battle for the White House.
I know my Republican friends claim we're not producing enough oil.
Congress must approve the measure, and Republicans are against it, as even some Democrats are voicing concerns.
We have now evidence to think that the oil companies would pass that on to the consumer.
Biden today demanding that companies pass on the benefits, though officials have conceded there are no guarantees.
I call on the companies to pass this along, every penny of this 18 cents reduction to the consumers.
Biden's move pitting him against then-candidate Barack Obama, who once bashed the move as a gimmick to get more votes.
We're arguing over a gimmick to save you half a tank of gas over the course of the entire summer, so that everyone in Washington can pat themselves on the back and say that they did something. Well, let me tell you something. This isn't an idea designed to get you through the summer. It's an idea designed to get them through an election.
President Biden arguing that the Russian invasion has changed the calculus as he delivered this closing message to oil companies.
This is a time of war, global peril, Ukraine. These are not normal times. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you are paying for the product. Do it now. Do it today.
Now, Jake, when I asked about the fact that there is no guarantee that these companies would pass on the benefits to consumers, Energy Secretary Granholm told me that's why she's meeting with industry executives here at the White House tomorrow to ask for those assurances, though she acknowledged there is a bit of nervousness around that, around the idea that there is a chance that they could pass this and drivers would not actually see those benefits. Jake, she also acknowledged that if it does pass, they would only see a modest benefit if those benefits are actually passed on to consumers.
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House for us. Thanks so much. I want to bring in CNN business reporter Rahel Solomon. Rahel, the White House claims this three-part plan could save American drivers up to $1 per gallon of gas. Is that realistic? Do those numbers add up?
Well, I think a lot would have to go according to the president's plan to see those type of declines at the gas pump. I think the president knows that it needs the state, that the White House needs the states in order to see a meaningful decline at the pump. Look, one economist from the Dallas Fed, Garrett Golding, telling me this today. Look, if only the federal tax goes away, that might not be that noticeable. But if you take away state taxes on top of it, which can be over twice that of the federal tax, well, the impact could be significant, at least 50 cents in some states, so about 50 cents right there, Jake. However, and this is very important, according to Garrett, the more prices fall because of this, the more demand could be stoked, and with refining capacity already strained, that could lead to prices rebounding in short order. The idea here, Jake, is that, of course, this doesn't address the underlying issue that there is more demand for oil right now than there is supply, and the concern that this could actually be inflationary, that this could actually create more inflation because it creates more demand at a time when we don't need it. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, I spoke to an oil industry consultant earlier who said one thing that could actually lead to some significant savings or decent savings is the diesel tax suspension. Take a listen.
All right, Rahel Solomon, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Joining us now to discuss is Gene Sperling. He's a senior advisor to President Biden and the former director of the National Economic Council under Presidents Obama and Clinton. Gene, thanks for joining us. So President Biden just called on states to remove their own taxes on gas and diesel. It's something only a handful of states have done so far. Have you gotten any other governors on board with the president's plan?
Well, Jake, as you said, and you just were discussing, obviously, the combined impact of states joining in a tax holiday, particularly with the surge in revenues many have had that have given them surplus, would be extremely helpful. I think the most important thing we've seen is that we've already seen a Wharton Penn study that shows in the first few states that did do a tax holiday that between 75 and 85% of that benefit was passed on to consumers. Now, that's still not enough, but I think it does show that if we could pass this federal tax holiday, if we could get states to join in suspending their gas taxes, and if the president is successful in putting appropriate pressure on oil companies and refineries to pass on those cost savings to consumers, that you could see something that could be quite helpful. Not a silver bullet, nothing's a silver bullet, but you do everything you can in a time like this.
So should I take that as a no? You haven't gotten any governors on board yet?
Oh, I mean, you're just asking today. I don't know what the response has been, just in the last 7-8 hours since he's announced it. But we're certainly having those discussions, and we have certainly looked at the record of what has happened so far. But I would expect that now that the president has raised this, particularly with, again, states having had a surge of growth and revenue since the American Rescue Plan passed, and with the president raising this and the notion that there'd be a combined impact of 50 cents, and we'd like to see it be closer to $1 if we could get more refining capacity up and more benefits passed on to consumers. I think this would be significant. One point the president did make today is that we've seen oil prices go down $10. Normally that would drive gas prices down 25 cents. Instead, it's been about a nickel. So there's been some benefit, but not enough. And I think that it is appropriate for the president to make clear that at this time, a time of war, where there's record profits, let's put those profits to use, expanding capacity, and let's do everything in our power in a time of war to make sure we're giving some relief to American citizens who are just suffering really from this unthinkable aggression by Vladimir Putin.